Hey guys, I've got another housing market update here for you in October 2024 for Edmonton. However, this is based on not just what's going on in the housing market, but there's a really cool report that the Realtors Association of Edmonton released, which is basically the third quarter market report. So it looks at more economic data, including the total employment, like how many people are working, unemployment rate. I've got some cool stuff that looks at the brand new home housing market, including their kind of active inventory, the value of the permits, how many houses are starting, how many multifamily homes they're making, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of different things than what I typically put in my market reports that we're going to be looking at here. So if you're looking at buying or selling in the Edmonton area, you're going to want to make sure you tune into this video. All right, let's get started. All right, let's look at the first chart in the Realtors Association of Edmonton's third quarter market report for 2024. And that first chart is employment. So this is basically about the number of people that are employed in the Edmonton CMA. So that's Edmonton and a lot of the surrounding areas. So you can see that the employment numbers have been relatively level since sometime in early 2023, although it did dip down a little bit. It says the number of people working in the Edmonton region decreased month over month by 1,400 positions. And if you compare that to last year, it's down about 1,500 jobs or 0.2%. From my perspective, that doesn't seem like a big change in the number of people employed, but it did recently slightly dip down. Next up is the unemployment rate. This is also for the Edmonton CMA and it's also from Statistics Canada. And you can see that the unemployment rate has been going up a little bit in Edmonton, basically since mid 2024 by the looks of it. It says here that the unemployment rate in the Edmonton region increased in August to 8.6% from 8% in July and 7.1% in June. So there's been a significant swing just in the last few months. And it said the jobless rate in August 2023 was 6.2%. So just a year ago, more than 2% lower. So this might be a bit of a red flag that the unemployment rate is starting to pick up in Edmonton. If you look further back, like this chart goes back to 2020, we're around where we were at in early 2020. We haven't obviously shot up to when we were, right in the middle of the pandemic and the unemployment rate kind of skyrocketed there for a while, but it is creeping up. And if we compare this to the last chart where it showed that the employment numbers have been relatively flat, going down a little bit, unemployment's going up, that tells me that, yeah, we've got about the same number of jobs. However, with that unemployment rate creeping up a little bit, that makes it start to not look quite as positive. So that's something to keep an eye on. If unemployment rate continues to go up, that's less people working, spending money, and that can start to have a drag on the economy. All right, so next up, we're gonna look at residential building permit values. So these are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, essentially. Looking at this to see how much are we building? Is there a building boom? Is there a building bust? How does that compare to most recent years? And you can see that this does kind of move around quite a bit. Some months get a lot more activity than others. I'm not particularly surprised by that. If you've got more permits being pulled that month, it makes sense to me that it would be sort of seasonal, just like our real estate market in general. There's more sales in certain months, so that's gonna play into how many permits get pulled, right? So it says the total value of residential building permits issued in Metro Edmonton increased in July by 88% from a year prior to 427.2 million. After 7 months this year, residential building intentions were up 57% from January to July 2023 to 2.58 billion. That first one's just kind of comparing the same month to the last year. So this July was up a lot compared to the same month last year. But if you look at the first 7 months of the year, we're still up quite a bit, but up by 57%. So there's a lot more building going on. And if you look at the chart going back to 2020, you can see that most of the points for this year are at or above the highest levels that we saw anywhere from 2020 to 2022 before we had that big spike there. So that tells me that, yeah, there's a lot of building going on. The builders are obviously seeing the demand and they're willing to place those bets and pull those permits and spend that money. I don't know what percentage of this is for properties that have already under contract versus a spec home type of situation. I think a lot of it would be deals that they actually have under contract already, but I don't really know how much of that is spec home versus done deals with end users. I would think there's probably a decent amount of both though. So if you watched my last video comparing Edmonton to Toronto, I think this is part of the picture that the builders are spending the money and getting stuff built. All right, let's now look at the annual inflation rate. Again, this is for the Edmonton Edmonton CMA, and this comes from Statistics Canada. So this is the Consumer Price Index year-over-year percent change. It's basically always comparing it to the same month of the last year. And overall, you can see that inflation has remained much lower than it was in late 2021, and 2022 is where we had the worst of it by far. It says here the Edmonton's Consumer Price Index was up 1.7% year over year in August, compared with a 2.4% increase in July. So comparing it from August of last year, I think that's exactly where they want to be, under that 2% range at 1.7, but we were at 2.4 just last month. So it does kind of vary from month to month. And here it says Edmonton's annualized inflation rate was up 4.2% in August 2023. I would suspect that's still higher than most people would like it to be, whether it's the government, the federal government, economists, or just everyday people that don't like to see the prices of goods going up too much. I know the federal government, their target used to be, I think, around 2%. So 4.2 on an annualized basis is still, I think, higher than they'd like it to be, but it's still not insane numbers. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this now that interest rates have started to come down quite a bit. I would assume this is something that they're looking closely at. They're worried about it spiking back up again. If it did spike back up again and go crazy, then that could be a scenario where they might actually have to raise interest rates again. So it's a difficult thing to balance. Okay, now let's look at Alberta Net Migration. So this is for Alberta as a whole. And this basically includes both immigrants, like international immigrants, and people migrating from other provinces, like coming from Ontario or BC, for example. And you can see that there was definitely a lull or a little bit of negative in part of early 2020. Then it popped up a bit. 2021, mid 2021 is when it really started to kind of get going. And since 2022, we've been seeing quite a bit of migration into Alberta, both from international immigrants and from other provinces. So that's continued to remain strong. You can see here that it says Alberta continues to experience strong population growth in 2024 due to a high number of newcomers from outside of Canada and from other provinces. Total net migration from all sources amounted to 41,531 people during the second quarter, for an increase of 1.7% from April through June 2023. Pretty close to what it was in that same period in 2023. As you can also see, this data is a little bit old. Like the date that they had here was the end of the second quarter, essentially, of 2024. So they don't have all the data, or they don't have third quarter data. They just have the second quarter so far. Being in real estate, I get calls from people from Ontario and BC that are either definitely moving here or thinking about moving here, and giving them a consultation. I see this all the time. There's a decent chunk of my clients each year that come from other provinces. This does not include births. So this is not just talking about population growth in general. This is just population growth from outside of the province, essentially. One other thing I'll say about this is, so if we see that this number is increasing, and that doesn't include the population growth, but the number of jobs has been staying relatively steady, that to me explains why the unemployment rate can be going up while the number of jobs is staying steady. It's because the number of new jobs haven't quite been keeping pace with the population growth. That's what it means to me, at least. Again, I'm not an economist, but that's a little insight that I got from this. So this next one is single detached housing starts in the Edmonton CMA. This comes from CMHC. So these are actual homes that got started, and they're talking specifically about detached homes. So if you're coming from a place like Toronto where they don't build them anymore, or Vancouver where they don't build them anymore, or you need millions and millions of dollars, this shows you that Edmonton still gets detached houses built. And this is basically comparing 2022, 2023, and 2024 so far. 2024 is the blue line, and they've got the data up until August. It's obvious that they've been building more and starting more detached houses, I think, every single month this year compared to 2023, and even in some cases more than they did in 2022. Like July had more in 2022 versus now, but not too far off. 2022 is a big year for lots of building getting done, but this shows that 2024 has been very strong as well. It says over here that single detached starts in the Edmonton CMA increased in August by 43.7% from a year ago to 691 units. This was the strongest August performance for single family builders since 2007. There's pretty much a detached housing boom going on in Edmonton area for new housing starts. What to take away from that, I'm not sure. It definitely shows us there's good demand for detached homes and that the builders are willing to take the risk on it and do it. The housing starts, I believe the definition of that is that when it actually starts, like it's not just the permit like what we looked at earlier, but when it starts is when they've put shovels in the ground kind of thing. This does go up and down over time, so I'm not sure exactly what insight to take away away from that? Like, does that mean the market's strong and will remain strong? Does that mean that these numbers might be peaking? I can't say for sure, but it is one piece of the puzzle, and at the very least, it does show you that detached houses are getting built here in Edmonton. This next one's taking a closer look at that same kind of data, and it's single detached housing starts, units, annual and year to date. So this one lets us go back further and see kind of where we're at, which would help put it in perspective. Going back to 2016, you can see in 2023, we had 5,000 units, and 2022, we had over 6,000 units. And then you can also see where we're at 2024 year to date. We're already close to 4,500 units, whereas the same time last year, we were only at 3,000 units. Certainly makes it look like we're gonna be more like a 2022 year. It puts it into perspective that we're on definitely one of the highest, if not the highest, in the last 8 years in terms of housing starts for detached homes. It says so far this year, single family starts in the Edmonton region have increased 45% from the first 8 months of 2023 to 4,355 units. Within the city of Edmonton, single detached starts for the year to date have amounted to 2,881 units, up 46.2% from January to August of last year. So that second paragraph or sentence is basically just saying it's looking just at Edmonton versus the Edmonton CMA. So you can see the percentage increase is pretty much the same for those two areas. So it's not like it's just outside of Edmonton where these housing starts are happening, and it's not just inside of Edmonton, it's happening in the whole region, essentially. I've still got a bunch of cool charts to go over with you guys, but one thing I did want to say is if you like this sort of analytical approach, if you've watched some of my other videos, I like to look at the data, not just pretty houses, essentially. If you like that type of approach and you're trying to make a decision about buying or selling in the Edmonton region, I'd love to help you out. I offer free consultation calls. You could just shoot me a text or call me at 780-819-5508. Again, that's 780-819-5508. Or if you'd prefer to just book a time on my calendar, you can go to booktrevornow.com. Again, that's booktrevornow.com, and you can just select it and book it right there. And then you can fill me in on kind of what your thoughts are, and I can fill you in on what my reaction is and what kind of insights I can give you. So just reach out, and love to chat with you. All right, let's continue. All right, now this next one I actually got a little bit excited about. It's new home inventory, unabsorbed, single, and semi-detached. So that would be detached homes, and then semi-detached would typically refer to like a half duplex. So I don't think they include residential attached in there. I didn't know that we actually could get these numbers, but apparently CMHC does have them. I don't know if they survey or make all the builders tell them everything, but this is showing you the total number of units completed and unoccupied. So you can look at that as basically a house that's built and ready to go for someone to move into, but it hasn't been sold yet and nobody's moved into it. So all my other videos, I'm looking at the resale market, and some of the new stuff ends up in that number, but there's a lot of the new home inventory that does not go on the MLS. So I don't usually get to see the whole picture here. So this here says there's 1,327 completed and unoccupied single and semi-detached units, including show homes. So those ones, it's not like anybody's gonna be moving in anytime soon because they're using it to sell more houses. Reported by CMHC in the Edmonton region in August, down from 1,354 units in the preceding month. In August 2023, CMHC recorded 1,625 unabsorbed new singles and semis in inventory across Greater Edmonton. Just looking at the most recent few bars here, you can see that the inventory is dropping, and that might explain why we've been seeing more permits and more housing starts happening, because that inventory level is starting to drop. It's still not as low as it was in 2021, 2022, when it was quite tight and crazy. I know we certainly saw some big increases in prices from builders in 2022. I happened to be buying a home that year and saw it happen right before my eyes. But this basically gives you that other half of the market. Before, we got to see how many millions and billions are they spending on permits, or the total value, not the cost of the permit. How many of those properties are getting started, but now this is how many are sitting there. Essentially, it would be close to calling it like active inventory that's not sold yet if we're comparing it to resale. But we're at levels that are not crazy. This goes back to 2020. It's somewhat similar levels that we saw then, but it is dropping a little bit. So you have to keep an eye on that. If that continues to drop, then I would expect there to be upward pressure on new home prices as well. That moves pretty nicely into the next one, which is the average absorbed new home price, single family units. Now we're talking about prices. This line graph, it's got got both the trend, which is a 6-month moving average. So that's them taking basically the last 6 months, the numbers for each of those months, and then averaging it. So it's going to be a smoother line. You're not going to get quite as much jaggediness that you're seeing in the actual number, which is the red line. And you can see that this goes back to 2020. And like I just said, in 2022, we saw significant price growth. At the beginning of 2022, the average absorbed price looks like it was around $560,000. And then it kind of ramped up pretty quickly in 2022, almost up to $620,000. Went down a little bit there, but mostly kind of sideways for a while, and went up a tiny bit in like mid 2023, went down a little bit from there, and then kind of going sideways for most of 2024. So this year in 2024, going to the resale market, we saw actually prices go up quite a bit, but it doesn't look like you saw the same sort of increase with the brand new homes. There was quite a spread between brand new prices and resale prices. So from my perspective, I think resale prices were catching up a little bit and closing that gap between brand new and resale. But you can see that there has been, just in the last couple months, there has been increases in the actual prices for the new homes. It hasn't caused that 6-month moving average to move up very much yet. But if new home inventory goes down, and even if they're building a bunch, if the total inventory levels goes down, then I would think that could create a scenario where you could see upward pressure on prices. But from my perspective, there are not too many changes in the last couple of years, I guess, for new homes. That was all my thoughts. Let's see what the actual text says here. So it says the average price for single family homes absorbed in the Edmonton region increased by 2% year over year in August to $637,014. Modest increase, nothing too crazy, but still an increase. For the year to date, the average single detached sales price has remained largely unchanged from the average level during January to August 2023 at $616,737. So that's pretty much in line with what my perspective was as well. Now this is also looking at price data. This is new housing price index for the Edmonton CMA, and this is from Statistics Canada. It excludes apartments. That would include detached homes, half duplexes, residential attached, and they've got it here on the bottom, contractor selling price for ground oriented units. So I guess that's the excluding apartments thing. They're not just on the ground. This is looking at the year over year percent change. You can see that those did actually, it was more like in 2021 when we start to see some price increases, but some pretty big increases in late 2021 and 2022. Came down at the beginning of 2023, and this actually does show some decreases in that time, but with it going up again kind of starting in the first few months of 2024 kind of thing. So Statistics Canada new housing price index for Edmonton increased 2.1% from a year prior in August. That was pretty much in line with the last chart, which showed a 2% increase on the average absorbed price, as they like to put it. And it says here, for the year to date, this index of contractor selling prices for ground-oriented units was up on average by a modest 0.2% from the first 8 months of last year. That still kind of fits in line with my thoughts that the resale market seemed to be playing a little bit of catch up with the new home prices this last year, since this year we actually saw more gains than they're seeing for sure. So that's what's been going on with prices for new homes. Next, switching over to multifamily housing starts. So they define this as semi plus row plus apartments. So apartments are pretty straightforward. Row houses basically also include what we usually call residential attached for resale, or townhouses would often fall into that category. And semi includes half duplexes. So they're actually putting quite a few things in here, and it's comparing 2022, 2023, and 2024 so far. Over here on the right, it says multiple dwelling starts in Metro Edmonton increased in August by almost 19% from a year earlier to 1,177 units. And of the 823 apartment units started across the region in August, 775 were destined for the rental market, according to CMHC. So out of that 1,177, 823 were apartments, and 775 of those 823 were going to be rental apartments versus like resale condos, essentially. So the takeaway from that is that most of the apartments being built are for rental purposes. I'm not super surprised by that, since the condo market has been in a slump for many years now in Edmonton. It probably doesn't make it quite as sexy or attractive to developers to build apartment condos recently. However, on the other side of the thing, there have been some good lending programs from CMHC, like the MLI Select program, that have made it attractive for investors and developers to build more rental apartments. So that's been incentivized. So I'm not surprised that that's taking up the bulk of the apartments being built. I wonder what it looks like in Toronto, where you guys don't actually build detached homes and all you have is apartments, or mostly apartments. Are most of those condos that are going to be belly up soon that are new? I don't know, but it's definitely a way different market in Edmonton than it is in Toronto and Vancouver. But yeah, just looking at this, you can see that it is up from last year. Looks like for the most part, it's up from 2022 as well. It looks like they're building more of them than they are detached homes. If I'm looking at this data correctly, that's what it looks like. If you compare it to the detached single family, we had 691 units in August for detached. They are building not quite double the number of multifamily, but that's including a lot of different stuff, not just apartments. This is now looking at the annual numbers going back to 2016, very similar to that other chart. You can see that 2023 and 2022 were both on the higher side, higher than they had been anytime since before 2016. And 2024 year to date is significantly higher than 2023 year to date. So Edmonton is not just building detached homes, we're also building multifamily properties. It says here, after 8 months this year, multifamily starts have increased in the Edmonton CMA by 51% from January to August 2023 to 7,569 units. Within the city of Edmonton, multiple dwelling starts so far this year have increased by 1/2 over the first 8 months of 2023 to 6,007 units. Lots of stuff getting built in Edmonton. All right, so that's it for reviewing the third quarter market report for 2024 from the Realtors Association of Edmonton. It was fun to look at this and get some of the other parts of the economic picture, not just what's happening specifically with home sales themselves and inventory levels. So helps give you a better overall picture of kind of what's going on. Lots of stuff's looking good for Edmonton. The main thing that kind of stuck out to me as a bit of a red flag was that the unemployment rate was going up closer to that 8, or I think it was over 8%. I'm actually curious to look at more long-term unemployment numbers in Edmonton. I think it's been around 8% for significant periods of time in the past, so I'll have to check up on that. But overall, I would say it doesn't look too bad with what we got going on here. We got people moving here, we got houses being built. The main thing to look out for is that unemployment rate from my perspective. I hope you guys got value out of this video. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.